and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers, by gamers. I'm Barjo.
And I'm Junglist. Last week we went behind the scenes at the Creative Assembly. This week we play their game Stormrise.
And two big games get pushed onto the small screen. Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars goes back to its roots with a top-down view for the DS. And Resistance Retribution tries to cram all of its massive bosses, levels and arsenal onto the PSP.
The world is feeling the pinch financially, but as they say, when the going gets tough, the tough go in search of cheaper entertainment alternatives. Ray investigates the effect of the global financial crisis on gaming.
And Freddie Mercury, may he rest in peace, as we just slaughter Bohemian Rhapsody from the latest SingStar, Queen.
So you think you can love me and leave me to die?
But first, can you guess the game for this week? News time.
Good game! Japanese game publishing giant Namco Bandai have dug deep into their pockets to buy a whopping 95% share in the stocks of smaller company D3 Publisher. D3 are responsible for putting out several hit games over the past few years, including Puzzle Quest Challenge of the Warlords and the recent release Galactrix, both made by Melbourne-based Infinite Interactive. With their controlling stake in the company, Namco Bandai will reportedly keep D3 Publisher operating as a subsidiary company. It's becoming harder and harder to deny the casual gaming revolution, as Wii Fit officially outsold Halo 3 in the US last week. The half-game, half-virtual gym hit 6 million in sales, just edging ahead of the 360's flagship shooter, even though Wii Fit came out 8 months later. Good game!
Despite there being more than 100 million Nintendo DS's in gamers' hands around the world, the choice of adult games on the console has been a limited one, till now. Enter Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars.
Going back to its top-down thuggery roots, Chinatown Wars has echoes of the first GTAs. Everything from the design of the game to the animations of roadkill.
You play as Hung Lee, climbing the gangster ladder in Liberty City. You'll be taking out rival gangs, running drugs, and delivering takeout. It can be quite hard to find some of the game's activities, like the loose exchange, for example, so you'll end up exploring. That's how I found my chainsaw, Joe.
Yes, chainsaws are back, and tanks, and unlike GTA 4, there's some silliness from the first GTAs in this one, which is a nice reprise. The humor here isn't in the writing, which tries too hard and comes across as lame. It's in the action.
Yeah, there's just something fun about squishing your way through town. It's a shame there's so many cops. There's just too many, really, and they get on your nerves.
It would be easy to be put off by all the drug running early in the game, but that's just to teach you how the GPS works.
Stick with it, because it doesn't take long to rack up a few taxi fares, get some cash and invest in some drugs. It was surprising to me, Jung, that they used real names for the drugs in the game.
Yeah, it's weird that Fallout 3 had to change their drug references and Chinatown Wars didn't, but I suppose in Chinatown Wars you don't actually use the drugs.
The use of touchscreen is fantastic, from smashing through windows, driving through toll booths, hijacking cars and defusing bombs, and you really feel like you're pulling out your screwdriver as you're pulling out a stylus when you get into hijack mode.
The whole of Liberty City is streamed so smoothly here that for such a tiny console, it's a massive achievement. There's weather effects and cars are beautifully shaded, there's crumple and plenty of music and dialogue. It's pretty rare that you'll get any lag, and you don't get any of that nasty 3D texture shaking that's rampant in 3D DS games.
Yeah, Jung, I'm still having nightmares about that Need for Speed Undercover port. There's plenty of control and display options here. The best one we found was actually putting your GPS route on the road itself. Also, cars lock onto the road, so driving is a lot easier.
This can all be turned off and tweaked, and our only real criticism is that you can't really zoom out far enough.
I guess, John, but I think this one's pushing the DS hard enough already, so I'd rather have a good-looking game with this camera view.
Multiplayer has some fun modes, but it's only local, which is a shame. Online features let you send messages to friends and trade spots and gear, but that's about it.
Even though I'm a fan of the other PSP incarnations of GTA, I reckon this top-down view is much more fun. I'm giving it 9.5 out of 10.
I'm giving Chinatown Wars a 9. This week's great gaming moment, believe it or not, goes to a game based on a movie. That in itself is usually enough to consign it to the total garbage bin, so imagine their surprise when gamers feasted their eyes on this. Rare's 1997 masterpiece, GoldenEye. Not only did it have the best shooting yet seen on a console and managed to make the gamer feel very Bond-like, but gamers really knew they were in for a great ride right from the first level, when we saw Bond launch himself clear off the side of a dam, making it this week's great moment in gaming.
Good game!
Out of 6 billion people on this planet, quite a lot of them are into football, and some of them enjoy number crunching, and quite a lot of those enjoy a good bit of strategy. For that corner of society is reserved the Football Manager game. And finally now they have an MMO called Football Manager Live, where every other manager in the world is a real live person.
A lot of people can't see why anyone would want to play a game like this, but if you're into football full stop, they can be quite addictive. It's very much about the money, it's revenue based, so whether that's wheeling and dealing with other managers for the top players, putting together a juniors league, upgrading your stadium for advertising space, or simply just trying to boost morale, it all comes down to the meka-ching-ching.
And you do get a few shysters that try to buy your top players for cheap, and a few spam emails, but overall the community is very friendly, and it's even quite common for people to use their full names.
Yeah, and in the end, it's not about trying to get the best of other managers, it's more about steady financial growth.
You can't really spend 5 hours straight in this one like you can a normal Football Manager game, because you need to play your fixtures when your opponents are online. Certain things like upgrading your stadium or leveling up your managerial skills can take hours or days to finish, and you can't queue them up, so it's a case of whoever can log in the most regularly has the advantage.
Each season is just a few weeks, after which all players age 1 year and you start again. You can play friendlies whenever you want, but the matches aren't the most exciting part of the game. They're just dots instead of a 3D simulation. But you do get some nice dot acting. I jumped out of my chair more than once when I saw my dot send that smaller dot into that little square.
You know, it kind of reminded me of those browser-based fantasy games where you manage your kingdom, except instead of sending off dwarves to capture 200 acres, you're sending off your lads to capture 3 points.
Final thoughts?
The latest generation of Football Manager games are freakishly in-depth. This comes nowhere near that, but at the end of the day, there's just no substitute for having a real live human opponent. And those who love it will really love it. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
With a tiny download and software that doesn't demand much at all, it's one of those games that you're going to check more than once a day, you know, and I'm sure it'll be the bane of more than one teacher or boss as goal-hungry gamers check their shoulders and make heavy use of the Alt-Tab. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Times are tough. There's no doubt that the global financial crisis is affecting the Australian economy. But many analysts have described the games industry as being recession-proof. But are things really all that rosy? As publishers and developers announce job cuts across the board, how will this affect the local industry? And how will the crisis affect us as gamers? Is the current financial crisis affecting what you're buying as a gamer?
I'd say I've been buying less games than I used to. I still do buy games, but I'm certainly cutting back on how many I'm buying.
Probably buying a few more downloadable games. They're a lot cheaper, $20 versus $100. It's an easy way to get a game.
I have like 4 different platforms I buy across, so I don't think it's really influenced me much at all.
Yeah, I've been borrowing a lot more games off friends, and I've been purchasing a few more trade-ins than I usually would.
Not particularly. I just recently purchased a new Wii.
If I do buy something, it's because I've, played it before.
So you find yourself taking fewer risks?
Definitely. The entertainment industry is, from what I've heard, pretty much recession-proof. As things get worse, people look for more distractions.
I don't think anything's really recession-proof.
Aaron, some analysts have described the games industry as being recession-proof, but are things really all that rosy?
Well, the average age of gamers in Australia seems to be between 27 and 29 years of age.
So while we have the stereotypical high school and university age gamers who can pretty much do whatever they want, they're probably going to be fairly resilient to the recession. It's those people who have a mortgage, who have families, who have a car loan, who have other commitments that are going to have a massive reduction in their spending habits.
The dollar's weaker, people are spending their money in a much more conservative way, and the cost of doing business is going up, so it's going to affect the whole distribution chain in video games. We're seeing people having staycations. They'd rather stay at home and watch a DVD or play a game. And video gaming offers a lot of value for the money you're spending. There's a lot of entertainment time that mum can play, dad can play, and the kids can play.
Well, over the last few months, we've had some fairly significant layoffs and retrenchments among various development studios. And even distributors aren't immune to the situation. The recession-proof industry isn't quite as stable as most people might want it to be.
So it seems we're still buying games, although our spending habits have changed. What are some of these shifting trends?
The computer games industry did around $2 billion last year in retail sales, and we think it's going to do a similar amount this year. However, what we do see right now is a shift in consumer spending. Consumers are looking for more of a bargain, particularly our pre-owned business is booming right now.
Have there been a drop in sales in any kind of games?
Sales haven't necessarily dropped. I think we just see a shift in consumer spending.
People are buying older games and playing those. And when you buy a second-hand game, you're not actually giving money back to the developers again. They've already received money for that game. In particular, in the PC market, people don't have the money to spend on upgrades to their hardware. So these games that are coming out that require you to upgrade your graphics card or your CPU or increase the amount of RAM that you've got, unfortunately, I'm just not going to pay that. We'll also see a move towards social networking software, and this will include massive multiplayer online games that allow you to interact with other people, seeing as the assumption is that people won't be going out so much.
I think what we may see coming forward is the hardcore gamers may be a little bit more choosy in what they're buying. You know, they've only got a certain amount of dollars and probably less of them these days, so they may want to spend those just a little bit more smartly.
If there's likely to be a shift in spending habits, what could this mean for game development? We caught up with Tom Crago of the Game Developers Association Australia to find out.
Well, look, what's happening with publishers at present is that they're finding it much more difficult to access capital to fund games. They've also seen a huge percent of their value wiped off because of the stock market crash. And as a result of that, they're being much more conservative. They're taking less risks. And that definitely does have a flow-down effect to the development community. And I think one thing we'll see is the emergence of smaller teams. I think publishers, as they become more mindful of the bottom line, they're going to want to look at making a series of smaller bets.
I see it as an opportunity. I mean, all these people going down, there's going to be spots opening up for smaller guys like us, smaller teams, that, you know, when the time's right, people are going to give us a chance because there's less competition there. And, you know, obviously if we step up, then, you know, that's how it's going to be.
So it's not all doom and gloom. Some developers and even gamers might actually have something to look forward to. For others,
It's been a quiet few months for the PSP, and now Sony Bend, the developers of Siphon Filter Logan Shadow, with a little bit of help from Insomniac Games, are breaking the silence with Resistance Retribution for the PlayStation Portable.
Set in the 50s, you play as Grayson, a ragtag ruffian Brit who, after seeing his brother turn alien zombie, decides to go AWOL and seek revenge, and investigates why the Chimera conversion centers are being shut down.
His brother's death had sent Grayson over the edge. Grayson deserted his unit and went on a vendetta to destroy every Chimera conversion center he could find.
The story is told like a documentary, and you're constantly reminded that Grayson doesn't play by the rules. Some enemies become friends and friends become enemies, and you're pulled through the story at a good pace despite some over-the-top acting and confusing moments.
I am sorry, James, but you are right. We do not have time to argue.
I guess you need to be over the top on the small screen, John.
Maybe. Resistance is kind of a blend of a FPS and a cover shooter. Auto-aim will lock onto most enemies, and if you want to move into cover, all you have to do is move next to a rock or the corner of a wall, and if enemies are around, you'll automatically go into hiding.
The cover system sucks, and it's the automation that breaks it. You're constantly being pulled into cover when you're trying to run away from enemies, and that just gets you killed fast. Also, the snap to corner cover is automated as well, so you'll constantly be getting in and out of that accidentally. There's no button to get in and out, and you really need that control, you know?
Yeah, it's a shame to be fighting the cover system when you should be fighting the Chimera. Other than that, the controls are pretty good. You can tweak a lot of it. The game is much more fun when you turn auto-aim off, for example, but then it kind of becomes ridiculously hard. We definitely recommend turning auto-center off, though, because then you're always in control of your camera.
Maybe it's just personal preference, but for me, the less auto anything in a game, the better.
I'm a big fan of the auto-aim that only activates when you zoom in on people, like we're seeing in some console FPSs nowadays.
True, John, you know, that's a good exception, and I wish they'd done it here. You can zoom in for a headshot or a closer attack, but you spend all your time strafing, so it's not really worth doing unless you're going up against exploding enemies with exploding body parts.
Enemies seem to have way more hit points than they should, and there's no regenning health, hence the peppering of health and ammo at every turn. If COD 4 has taught us anything, it's that quick kills can be gratifying, but unfortunately here, enemies just take way too much damage before they disappear into frame rate saving oblivion.
Most of the Chimera don't react enough when you shoot them, and for the most part they just seem to glare at you regardless of what you're doing to them. They have the same expression the whole time. It's like they've stubbed their toe and never recovered from it. Maybe it's part of their culture, John, to have a communal toe bash before entering battle.
Yeah, sometimes they do look like gymnasts wearing leotards. Check out the sniper's artistic pose. The Chimera in this game look a bit lazy, like a poor man's Baraka. They could be humans with masks on. Drones get pretty annoying as well, but every other enemy is pretty cool. And Screamers have some nice effects when they get up close and explode.
We've been pretty negative so far, and it's not really fair because there are some extremely strong parts to this game. Like the other Resistances, the weapons are fantastic, and it's a huge arsenal to select from.
The Auger is here, as well as our favorite wall-bouncing discs. But the Lark rocket launcher is the coolest. You can pause the rocket mid-flight, re-aim your trajectory, and then let it rip. This is good for getting behind enemies' shields especially, or just teasing them.
The level design is fantastic, and you barely notice you're being funneled through a linear path. The large environments are large, and there's some nice sci-fi door-opening moments too, if you're into that sort of thing. The composer here is Gary Scheinman, and he actually worked on BioShock and Destroy All Humans. He's really good at what he does, and the horror-inspired riffs and creepy piano music could make preparing a cup of tea scary.
There are some great moments, and I was really happy to see they went with the horror focus that we saw in Resistance 2. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, it was a bit hit and miss for me, Jung. There is a demo available, and others may not find our niggles so niggly. I'm giving it 7.
Good game.
The war is over, but what to do with all those surplus lacerators? Don't throw them away. With our Waggle Max lacerator appliances, they have a million other uses. From the office to the kitchen, when it's ready. Don't throw out those saws either. They're just as useful for babysitters. Or the purists still looking to use their original lacerator. Waggle Max put a lacerator in your lacerator so you can lacerate while you're lacerating. Waggle Max Technologies, because problem plus chainsaw equals no problem.
Good game.
The final contender to make strategy work on a console is here, Stormrise, and it's homegrown.
It's set in the future, and of all the people to destroy the Earth, it was those damned tree-hugging ecologists. Those rich enough to freeze themselves underground did so until the land was habitable. The unlucky ones were left to stick it out, and after thousands of years of living on Twinkies, they've evolved and created the biologically enhanced faction, the Psi. When the former world leaders woke up from their nana-nap, they wanted to rule the world again and created the technologically advanced faction, the Echelon. Conflict ensues.
In order to issue fast commands using a controller, Stormrise uses a new control scheme called Whip Select. You command from the line of sight of any one of your units, and selecting a unit is as easy as flicking the right stick in that direction. It's fast, it's functional, and as the camera speedily whips around the map, there's no slowdown at all. Whip Select works perfectly.
From that unit's line of sight, you can issue orders to any other unit, so it pays to have a scout in the air just for that point of view.
Capture this sucker.
Every unit is pretty much available from the start, and you'll be making hordes of them, so it's a good thing you can group 3 units into one entity. One thing that really bothered me about the campaign, though, Jung, is that at some point they must have realised they didn't have the best dialogue in the world, but you can't skip it, not even if you've heard it before.
How long have I been out?
Long enough for things to go to shit.
Stow it, Huntsman.
Man, that campaign was painful. The triggered events don't always work right. It leaves vital things unexplained. The action is poorly spaced out and slow-paced, and you can spend hours on a mission without having fun. The only reason you put up with the massive chore that is the campaign is because very slowly you're learning about a game system that could be pretty good for multiplayer.
Multiplayer is the main focus of the game, but you need that single-player campaign to familiarise yourself with the game.
Yeah, and also learning how all the units counter each other. You know, it's a new IP with lots of new units. Most of them have extra modes for countering different units, like transforming to use anti-air rockets. You don't want to jump straight into multiplayer without knowing all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that if you don't plan on getting online with it, you might want to give Stormrise a miss. You'll have much more fun with Halo Wars. However, if you are that kind of gamer that likes to jump online straight away and smash some face, you can probably learn about the counter system from somewhere else and still have a decent amount of fun with it.
Skirmishes see both sides capturing resource points and eventually meeting in the middle. With attack bonuses for setting up crossfires, you'd think it'd be pretty easy to get into a stalemate, but both factions have units that are good at breaking these, such as the Echelon's artillery and air bombardment, and the meaty melee units of the side.
Installation under attack.
Life is pretty expendable in the world of Stormrise, so you'll need to keep on replenishing your front lines. If you can sneak some units around the side and cut off the supply line of your enemy, you can actually give yourself an economic advantage. However, there is a resource cap on your units, so coming up with these flanking forces can be a bit risky.
As we learned at the Creative Assembly last week, the balance between the two factions is very linked with the level design. The Echelon focus exclusively on ranged units, and their snipers and artillery love wide open spaces. The Psi, on the other hand, love hiding around corners with their melee units and sneaking around with cloaked units, and they'll make you pay for not scouting out your path properly. All this means that the levels can be kind of hard to get your head around. Knowing exactly what terrain your jump packs can go up and where that great alcove is for an ambush is going to be essential for competitive Stormrise.
In terms of production values, Stormrise is rough around the edges, and this will hold it back. And it's a reflection of a small development team and a small development time. But I think with these new controls, the multiplayer is a little bit better than Halo Wars.
Well, what are your final thoughts?
Jung, out of all the campaigns and all the games, this one is the most tedious. And it's good for multiplayer, but that's not good for everyone. So, as an ambassador to all the offliners out there, I'm giving it a 5.
Well, yeah, it's unrefined and not really a pleasure to watch, but as someone who regularly ditches the campaign and jump online, I'm giving it a 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
So, did you guess the game for this week?
It was Blast Corps, a smashing demolition game for the Nintendo 64. You had to use a variety of heavy industrial vehicles, including bulldozers, dump trucks, and robot suits, to smash a trail of rubble through your hometown and make a path for a truck carrying an atomic missile. If the truck crashed into a building, this happened.
Blast Corps came out in 1997, which was arguably the most productive year in Rareware's history.
You're just trying to impress me.
Since it was the same year that they also released 2 other classics, GoldenEye 007 and Diddy Kong Racing, also for the Nintendo 64. Next week, the lovable Wallace and his K9 sidekick Gromit get to star in a point-and-click adventure all of their own.
Moggy off, you lobby gobblers!
Some other classic characters get pixelated, this time the not-so-lovable Corleone family in Godfather 2.
The Wii not only shrugs off, but spits in the face of the family-friendly tag with the ultra-violent but ultra-stylized Mad World.
Chiptunes is the art of making music with old gaming consoles. We take a look at this emerging 8-bit trend and meet a muso who's making music with a machine older than himself.
But now, it's time for us to make some music of our own, Jung.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. Open your eyes, to the skies and sea. I see a little silhouette of a man.
Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango?
Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me.
Galileo, Galileo,
Well, SingStar Queen is a dream come true for Karaoke Queen fans, but let's face it, Jung, there was only ever one Freddie Mercury.
Till next time, gamers, Junglist out.
Bajo out. No, I will not let you go. Let him go. No, no, Jung, I will not let you go. Oh, Jungie, come back. We've got more SingStar to sing in here for me.